There we go. Hi, everyone. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so sorry about the technical difficulties. And today we also have a drumming circle going on in the background. So if you do hear some interesting sounds, it is our students being their amazing selves and being musicians. So Crucial Conversations is brought to you by the Bridges 2E Media and the 2E Centre for Professional Development. My name is Maria Kennedy, and I have the pleasure of being your host today. So thank you in advance for joining our conversation, for sharing your thoughts and your questions, and for completing the welcome poll, which, yes, wow, lots of people have completed. So we'll talk about that a little later. We really couldn't do this without you. I also want to thank the people working behind the scenes, which is my amazing technical crew of JT, John, and Stephanie. So thank you I want to thank them for their patience and their hard work and expertise. Without them, this really wouldn't happen. So we know that technical difficulties are all part of life. And I think it's really kind of fortuitous because as parents and educators and just about people moving through the world, we're constantly being faced with new challenges. And so we have to learn how to deal with them. And so too do our students. And so today I am really, really fortunate that my guest is the amazing Debbie Reber, and she's going to talk to us about how to help our teams launch. So without further ado, Debbie, hi. Oh,
That's on me. That is on me. I forgot to unmute myself.
I love you. Thank you so much. I was just about to have another panic attack.
It's all good.
It's always good. It is so wonderful to see you, Debbie. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I am so happy to be here, and I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
So fantastic. So before we get into the nitty gritty and really pick your brain, because your brain is so phenomenal, you know, you're a mom, you're an author, you're a podcaster, you run the amazing organization Tilt. I mean, can you just share with us a little of your story? What brought you to where you currently are?
Of course. And thanks for saying nice words about my brain. I always say that this was not part of my master plan to be running Tilt Parenting. This was not on the career trajectory that I saw for myself. But I came to this very honestly. I am the parent of 17-year-old twice exceptional kiddo. So I'm very much in this. And yeah, I created Tilt Parenting because I found myself really floundering as the parent of a differently wired child, 10, 15 years ago, and trying to figure out how to navigate education and really everything, because it was not the journey that I was expecting. And before I started Tilt, I used to write books for teenagers. So talking about teens today is, sparks me on so many levels, but I've always been an advocate for helping teens really lean into who they are and discover their purpose and their passion and kind of create the lives that they want for themselves. And so I did that for many, many years, specifically around teen girls. And now I've just done this huge pivot to be primarily supporting parents who are raising phenomenal, interesting, complicated humans and really trying to support the whole family and thriving.
You're just phenomenal. Thank you so much. We already have parents asking questions, and I just wanted to share the results so that we just have an idea of who's here joining us today. So we have lots of people. Yay, we have lots of gifted and twice exceptional people, which is wonderful. Obviously, we have parents and educators, therapists, researchers, and administrators. So thank you all so much for joining. And the question, do you think your child will, what will they do? Do a gap year, 12%, go straight to university, 28%, not go to university at all, 3%. They are undecided, 43%. And there's some people who are joining us that don't have a child, which is also great. I have to say that I'm not surprised that there is such a large proportion that don't know as yet. They haven't quite decided. For the last few years, having gone through a poor child who's confused and not knowing what on earth he wants to do with his life, I've begun to think, are we doing our kids a disservice when they're teenagers, requiring them to know where they want to go and what they want to do and what the future's supposed to look like? Because their hormones are all flying all over the place. It's kind of a difficult time for them to be making decisions. And so maybe for all those parents whose children have no clue what they want to do, could you maybe speak to how they could help their child, support them in that decision-making process? Because ultimately, I guess we do want our children to be really involved in that decision so that they can stick with it, so that they're enjoying it, maybe. I don't know, is going to university for everybody? Possibly not.
Yeah, possibly not. And I think even, I read articles on a daily basis about, more and more a college degree isn't necessary for so many different types of vocations, or especially for self-driven kids who are really interested in pursuing kind of more obscure intellectual avenues. But, this is such a big question, but I would say, one of the things that I think we can do to start with is make sure that we are not pressuring our kids in any way to feel like they need to know what's going on. And it's a real tricky balance, I find, of keeping things moving forward so the options are open, but not making a child feel that they need to know what this is going to look like. So how do you kind of keep making decisions so that there are a lot of so many avenues are open when a child is ready to make a decision, while not adding pressure to them or making them feel like they need to have it all figured out. We have a lot of conversations about timelines, and I think that's a great place to start. We know that differently wired kids, twice exceptional kids, asynchronous development, they can be, maybe intellectually, academically ready for really advanced things, but socially, emotionally, they may not be ready. They may have a lot of anxiety about what comes next. And so reinforcing that message constantly that there is no one way that this needs to look. This is your life. My job is to support you in realizing the life that you want. And you don't need to know what it is right now. All you need to do right now is play, be curious, explore, pursue things, get interested in things, follow those deep areas of interest, and don't feel like you need to have it all figured out right now.
I love that. I'm actually writing that down. Play, be curious, explore. Because I think that's just like, we seem to think, or at least I know that our education system, unfortunately, or fortunately, not quite sure which, I'm an educator and have been for a long time, but in education, we really are pushing that pass, fail, need to succeed, have to get A's, you have to be on target, and you must meet these developmental milestones, and you have to. And their life seems to be spent constantly chasing that goal set by somebody else. And so I love that notion that, could we take a breath? Could we stop? Could we play? Could we be curious? And can we explore? And does it really matter if on that exploration, we change our mind afterwards? Because maybe we discover through exploring that that's not what we want to do. So I really love that. Questions are coming in thick and fast, Debbie. I'm not sure I can answer. We can answer them all, but we're definitely going to try. And thank you all so much. Please keep them coming. We're definitely going to do our best. Okay, so my 2E tween, ASD, ADHD, PG, has a very narrow career goal. He wants to be a set designer for Lego, and he's young, and that's fine. But he isn't willing to learn anything that doesn't relate to that. how can I help him embrace learning more generally so that he can work towards having options as an adult? Ooh, I like that question.
I love that interest too. It's awesome.
Mm.
So, here's what I would say. First of all, I don't know how old your child is, but use the word tween. So I'm assuming somewhere in that like 9 to 12 age range. And so much is going to change. So I would just say that, first of all, that yeah, your child might be a senior in high school and still that is the career goal. And that's okay as well. But a lot is going to change. And what I have found is that those sometimes obscure interests can be avenues for really everything that's important that our kids need to know, especially our kids who, for me, especially at that age, it's really about emotional regulation. It's about executive function skills. It's about, kind of working on all of those life skills that can support a child in really achieving any goal down the road. So if you can not get too caught up in, these traditional, like, well, they, in this grade, especially a PG kid, they should be doing this kind of math and they should be at this level. And it's really hard to not get distracted by what other parents of these fascinating kids, what they're saying that their kids are doing, right? And oh my gosh, well, my child didn't do this at this age, and are we behind? And there's so much that we can really learn through, or that our child can learn through, a very narrow area of interest. And sometimes that takes more creativity on a parent's part to think about, how can I use this to look at math, or to look at planning and organizing, or to look at time management, or all of these other skills. But I would just go deep. I would like lean all the way in, especially at this age, and see, what happens when you really go in there and explore it from all kinds of different avenues, and see how that might spark other areas along the way.
That's brilliant. Yes. So on the back of that, I shall admit my own my own negative habits. I have to admit. So parenting's hard. All right.
Yes.
So I think very much like, AA Anonymous, so you have to admit what you're having trouble with, right? Yeah. So parenting's hard. And I've not always looked my best while parenting, so you've got the little one running around and the middle one screaming at you, and you're trying to do your full-time job. And obviously COVID has probably made this thing 10 times worse, because so many of our parents have been home with their children online, trying to do their work and trying to get their children to do whatever it is the requirement is from school. So while you're super stressed out, is there anything, that you would recommend for parents? So, some kind of habit that they need to maybe get into so that they don't fall down that negative spiral place where they're super stressed and yelling at everybody. I mean, because that's my bad. When I get super stressed, I get loud. So, you just go, stop, just don't argue with me. I can't deal with this right now. I'm good. It's not good.
Yeah. I've been there. I will say that, maybe this is TMI, but like my journey into perimenopause corresponded with the beginning of the pandemic. So that was really fun, living in a tiny apartment and, locked down here in New York. So anyway, all that to say, I too do not always show up as my best self in my relationship with my child. But I would say, as much as you can proactively fill your bucket, your emotional reserves. So, and I try not to use the self-care word so much, but I talk about conscious maintenance. So as much as you can, do the things. In fact, I just read an article in the New York Times. It was an opinion piece, I think yesterday, about how we need, I don't remember the language, but we need to we need to take action on the things that we know make us feel better, even if we don't feel like doing those things. Sometimes taking those actions can build it up. So whatever it is that you can do to kind of fill up those reserve tanks so that you can show up as your best self. And when you don't, you own up to it. Like, oh my gosh, I totally blew that conversation, or this is not how I wanted to speak to you, and I'm really sorry. I need to work on my own coping strategies right now. So I'm going to go collect myself, and I'll come back and we'll talk about this later. So I think treating ourselves with a lot of grace and kindness is really important right now, because we're all fried, like our kids and us, we're all kind of done. And as much as you can kind of proactively do something, even if it's, listening to a song once a day that makes you happy, like a song from your childhood or from your teen years that just brings you back and makes you feel a certain way. Like, do those things proactively so you can at least try to fill yourself up, and that will help you be better prepared to navigate the hard things. But we're having a very lifey time right now, so that stuff's going to happen.
I love that, lifey time. I love the concept of conscious maintenance. I'm going, yes, I need some of that. And obviously, I do enjoy music. It was interesting you mentioned music, because yesterday, some friends were saying that they had to think about 3 songs in their life that had really impacted them. And I think the first song that really impacted them. So as we were talking, people kept on coming up with different songs. And oh yeah, I remember that one. Oh yeah, I remember that one. So and what they had said was to create a playlist of those songs that really make you feel good, and bring back all of those positive memories. So I'm going, oh yes. And as you said that, I'm going, I must make my playlist. Although mine's grown now, but I still get stressed.
Of course.
So, so you mentioned before, in response to the tween question, about trying not to worry so much about where our children are going. But is there within that, so yes, no, we don't need to worry or hyper focus on where our child will be because they're going to change. But is there anything though that maybe tweens really do need, and so we can encourage them to do that? Or do we just wait and see what happens?
Just wait and see what happens. No, I would say, our children are all individuals, right? So there is no one size fits all for any of this. And anytime I have tried to, or seen other parents kind of pick these arbitrary goals for, that we believe, at this age, you should be doing this, or this is really important at this age. If it's not something the child is motivated to do, and it's not really where they are, because often they're, again, this asynchronicity, they may be like on their emotional, social level, maybe much younger than their same age peers. Like, they're just all over the place. So I think it's just really important to focus on where your child is and noticing where are they feeling the most joy and excitement right now, because that's where we want to put a lot of energy, because we know that, strengths-based parenting and supporting their strengths is the way to go. That's like the key to everything. And then really noticing where are there areas that are really kind of hanging them up right now? What's getting in their way, and not tackling all those at once, but picking 1 or 2 and thinking about, all right, I'm going to work on supporting the development of this at the same time. So I would really hone in on who the child is and where they are in their life right now, and use that as, the guide for where you're going to be focusing your energies.
I love that. We kind of try to do that within our school here. So we have that strength-based approach. So pursuing where they're excited, where they're happy, what gets them thinking about everything, feeling nourished. I like that. So, let's pop into one of the questions. So any advice for the 2E older teen who has several talents and interests and is having trouble deciding what to pursue?
That is a good question. Well, I guess my question, back to that question, would be, do they need to choose one thing right now? Like, is it possible for them to kind of play in all of these different areas right now? Or are you feeling, or are they feeling a need to really like hone in on one area? Because a lot of our kids are multi-passionate, and that is one of the really cool things about them. And they may get something from all of those areas. So maybe there's like a music or an artistic side, and that really, feeds one part of them. Maybe that helps with their anxiety or their stress, but then they have this other analytical side, and that engineering or Lego, construction, whatever that is. And maybe that's another area. So if you don't need to choose, I would, and they're not at a point where they have to decide something. I would see if they could continue doing those and see kind of if one of them starts to, as they're looking at what comes next or college programs, like what seems to be of the most interest. And they may not even at that point be able to make a decision. And sometimes there are programs where you can design, there are colleges where you design your own curriculum, where you, that have a more unconventional approach to pursuing knowledge and to going through a curriculum. So maybe those are things to explore. So I don't know if that answers your question, or if you're feeling like you need to make a choice. But I think if a kid's interested in lots of different things, if they're able to and they have the time to, I think it's great to keep kind of doing those if they're serving them in some way.
Nice. I like that. Okay, so what about the inner barriers when your kid holds back to embarrass others and therefore does not shine as bright as they might, so they miss to be seen or take a chance coming up? Do we need to be more confident and understanding that their passion will break through anyway? Ooh.
Yeah, I feel like there's research on this word passion too. And there's a lot of emphasis that our kids have to know what their passion is. And what I've been reading is that that's not necessarily realistic or what we should be encouraging our kids, because a lot of kids, if they don't feel that passion or they don't like identify with that, they might feel like they're in trouble. Not in trouble like they're going to get punished, but that they're behind, or they're not going to be as prepared, or they're lost, right? So I just wanted to throw that out there. I think this is really interesting that your child is kind of holding back so that they don't shine as brightly. Again, meeting the child where they're at and kind of like going underneath that. Is that an anxiety thing? Is it a self-worth thing? Is it a lack of confidence? Trying to understand what is underlying that, humility or whatever that is, and exploring that a little bit more. And that starts with,
she mentioned that her child doesn't want to embarrass their peers. So I guess probably when you're gifted and smarter than people around you, sometimes you don't want to embarrass them.
Yeah.
I know it's hard.
As I say to the humans I live, well, it must be really hard to always be the smartest person in the room. That quote from Broadcast News. And like, yeah, it is. But no, I love that. And it sounds like you have a really self-aware child too. If they're aware of how, who they are might impact their peers, that is wonderful. And I can also see how that could get in their way. I would say this is just something to kind of work through. And as you're, if you are looking at, applying to, summer programs or colleges and things like that, that's a time to have those conversations, because a lot of these kids may not feel even comfortable talking about their accomplishments or the things that they've done. And so that is an invitation to explore that more. And it might just be the way your child is wired, right? And so knowing that maybe they're a real empath, and that's going to be something you're going to always want to be working on with them.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you. Related to Erin's question, my 2E 6th grade son's school is very focused on building his tolerance and completion of what they call non-preferred tasks. Ooh, we know that word. Yeah. And his IEP focuses a lot on this. Is tolerance of non-preferred tasks even an appropriate goal for 2E kids? How would a parent determine when a non-preferred task is appropriate versus not appropriate?
It's such a good question.
Yeah.
And like what I'm getting from this question is that if that is the focus, right? If it's like non-preferred tasks, we all have them, right? And with our kids, they might be there might be more of them, and there might be more rigidity around doing them. But sometimes the non-preferred tasks that a school might identify are really don't matter in the big scheme of things. So I would get clear on what those tasks are that they're really pushing your child to work on, and see if you can, for me, it's like, especially with this sixth grader, oftentimes these IEPs, they add all the things. We're working on all the things right now, and we can't work on all the things at one time. And so I would see if you could pare that down if it's a non-preferred task that actually really matters, because we need to somehow get our kids bought in to even care about these things. And so if they don't see, especially a 2E kid, they're going to be like, this doesn't matter to me at all. Why do I need to know this? They'll, be an attorney and argue their case and have all this evidence for why it doesn't matter in the big picture. So I would try to see if you can find a non-preferred task that actually does matter, that your child can get bought into, and see if you can hone down on that. But I would say, yeah, that's kind of a bummer. Unfortunately, that's the way a lot of IEPs are written, is they're going to look at all the deficits and they're going to go all in on that. And so, as much as you can keep asking for another IEP meeting, you can have as many of those as you want, and see if you can keep kind of tweaking those goals. Because, especially a child who is more of a concrete thinker, and if there's a lot of resistance around those, like saying you're going to really get to know how to do these non-preferred tasks is not really the way to get them to want to do those things.
Right. I mean, I'm an adult, and when you keep telling me that I have to do these things, my default is I don't want to. Please don't make me. Leave me alone. And so that sends my poor stress level through the roof. And sometimes I just think, thankfully, where I work, we try and pare down those things, because sometimes those non-preferred tasks, as you say, are not quite important right this minute.
Right now.
Right. They will be.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's always that timeline thing, right? It's and often IEPs are written with these very arbitrary timelines. Well, your child's in sixth grade, they have to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And that is just not true. And so I always invite parents to push back. Like, actually, this isn't a priority for our family right now. It's not a priority for our child and for the way that, the values in our family right now. And we would like this changed. And these are the things that we are willing to work on, or that we think are important, and just see how much wiggle room is there.
I love that. So let's push back and let's let them know what's important for your child and your family at this precise moment. And we have so many questions. One of them is, where does a parent go to find schools good for 2E kids? Are there international options? Mother of a 2E, recent ADHD diagnosis just this year, and possible ASD, HS junior here. Ideally, he wants to move to the Netherlands.
Me too, Lisa. You may know that we lived there for 5 years, and I am trying to get back. So that's a really good question. There is a book that I'm going to recommend to you. It is called From High School to College. And I wish I had it to hold up, but it's by Elizabeth Hamblett. And she talks about how to get support for students who may have an IEP, like what does that transition to college look like, and how to find those schools. I don't know if there's a specific list. I know that Hoagie's Gifted and Davidson Young Scholars of the Davidson Institute, they may have some resources for how to identify those schools. And my advice is to, and what I'm doing personally, because we're starting this journey right now, is, and what Elizabeth would say is to call the schools or email the schools and just ask them very specifically. How do you support kids with learning disabilities? How do you support kids on campus? What kind of resources are there? More and more schools are actually really wanting neurodivergent students and are having supports on campus, which is really exciting. Internationally, I don't know. I will say that, again, we want to move back to the Netherlands. So this is a very relevant question for us. And I don't know that there is as much. My experience is there isn't necessarily as much support in a lot of the European school options, but I would just call them, just call them and ask them flat out, do you have supports on campus for kids with ADHD, for autistic kids? What do you do to help kids who need executive functioning support? Or do you accommodate? Do you allow for different modalities? So I would start there. I don't know of a guide that just kind of lists those schools, but if you find one, or if someone on this call knows of one, please share, because I would like to know that too.
Please do. And we'll definitely post it on our site. That would be really great. So if anybody knows or hears, please email me and let's get it posted. So we have another question. Hi there. When my teen was younger, I felt there were plenty of opportunities to extend their interest, access programs and opportunities to interact with people who are like-minded. But I felt there is less available for teens. Are there things we can offer our teens that I haven't thought about? So opportunities that are targeted at and appealing for teens. So where would she look?
Yeah, I would agree. It seems like, sometimes I'm on a bunch of listservs for, parents of 2-week kids. And sometimes these things come up. I'm like, oh, that looks great. And I'm like, it's for 6 to 12-year-olds or something. I'm like, oh yeah, that's not really an option anymore. What I would recommend is if you start with your teens' areas of interest and just do some research, where you live. Are there universities? Are there organizations that might have, museums? There, if you live in a city where there are museums, they often have special programs for teens, and just kind of do some research to see what's out there. It's sometimes you have to just do a little more digging to find those opportunities. And one of the positives of COVID is that a lot of those programs went online. And so they were you didn't have to be in the city. They were accessible anywhere. And many of them are remaining online. So I think that I don't know what your child's interested in. Blue Stamp engineering is something that we found during COVID. That used to be just New York City based, but now they had people from all over the world who are participating in that. So I would start with the area of interest and really just jump on Google, teen programs and whatever the subject is, and see what you can find.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. My son is an empath. Oh, sorry. Are there any challenges that we can expect as he enters adulthood? He is 19 years old. Oh, what a good
Nope,
age.
Susan, you're all set. It's all good. You should be. No, of course, I think moving into adulthood is complicated for our kids, and 19 is different for everybody, right? I think that's just one of the things we have to always be reminding ourselves, that our kids are going to likely need more support. Their launch may look different than we expected, or than our friends' launches look, and just kind of really owning that, like, we're going to do this on our terms, on our family's terms. I don't know, Susan, if there are like specific things that you're thinking about with regards to entering adulthood. I would say, especially being an empath, the more that you can support his emotional intelligence and development of really understanding how he navigates interacting with other people, and what that, how to kind of protect himself if he's feeling things too deeply, and, where that might show up, and whatever that support looks like. It might be therapy and things like that. But I would say the biggest thing is just really figuring out what you want that support system to look like on your family's terms, and kind of building the scaffolding that's going to help him. And then you kind of take the scaffolding down a little bit and then build it back up as you need to.
Beautiful. So quick question. I said quick question. I've got lots of questions. I don't know if they're quick. Sorry. What are you observing or learning about the call for neuropsychologists, therapists, school social emotional learning programs, support services, etc., to adopt or consider neurodiverse lenses while assessing the strengths and needs in supporting the neurodiverse learner and parent?
That's a really good question. I have to just be honest and say that I mostly hang out with, or, my kind of circle of people, go-to people, are very strengths-based and are very attuned to the unique presentation and needs of twice exceptional and neurodivergent learners. So I can't really say what the bigger landscape is. What I do know is that, people often will share in my Facebook community or, in the Tilt parenting community, looking for resources. And there's a lot of them out there, like more and more. It seems like, every city has at least one or two really good people who really understand the profiles of these kids and can really kind of tease out what the giftedness is impacting, and how the relative weaknesses are affecting this, and can really give us a clear profile of who our child is. So I don't know. I feel like it's, if I were to just hazard a guess, I would say I think there's increasing awareness and understanding about who these kids are. Even the language of twice exceptional is more, understood or recognized in so many communities. So I don't know if that, but I can't really give you a full, this is what I'm seeing, because I don't know that I have my pulse on that enough.
But that's great. But what we do know is that there are people who are moving in that direction. So hopefully the message is spreading, and there are people that she could definitely access by particularly looking for them. So that's definitely a good start, even if it's not complete as yet. What about an older teen who, no matter how many specialized schools you've tried, still has huge school anxiety and dislike? If they want their diploma, what other options are there?
Well, I mean, I certainly know of many people who've just done a GED. That can be a really good option for a lot of students. And I know many families who've made that choice. And I know that can be a really hard choice for a lot of families to make, because there's a stigma around even the word GED, like it implies something. But it can be such a good solution for a student who really just resists any kind of formal school environment. And so that would be option one. And unschooling as a way to kind of, if they need the diploma, right, to progress into whatever comes next, just unschooling for a while and really giving them the time to become self-directed in some area, and seeing what that is, and seeing if you can use that as a way to get them bought into kind of taking that next step of, studying for the GED and taking that next step, because at a certain point, we need them to get engaged in their own life and to really care about it. And at a certain point, if they're really engaged, then, and again, this may not happen when they're 16 or 17 or 18, it might happen when they're 25, but we want them to care enough about something that they'll realize, okay, to get there, I need to do this, this, and this. And so I see the biggest goal for us in those situations is to just encourage them in finding out what that thing is, supporting them, taking pressure off, not backing off completely, but just kind of really attuning to where the child is and kind of navigating that with them. There's no easy answer. It's hard.
Oh, yeah. So you said unschooling for a while. Can you just elaborate? Because how long is a while, and what are they doing if they're not going to school?
Yeah. unschooling is, and I'll just throw out the name Blake Bowles, if he's someone you're not familiar with. He is the unschooling guru that I refer to. He's fantastic, but unschooling is really like, it is what it sounds like. It's like no school. It's letting the child really do what they want to do. And this comes up all the time. And I've had Blake on my podcast a few times. Like, what does that mean? My child will sit in their room and be on Minecraft, 24/7. Yeah, maybe. What Blake would say, and maybe isn't true for all neurodivergent kids, Blake would say after a while, they're going to get bored with that. They're going to get sparked in something else, and they'll make that pivot. So unschooling is really ultimately trying to support a child in becoming engaged in their own interests and kind of driving the pursuit of that interest and that exploration, and using that as an anchor to see what else is out there. And then our job is just to facilitate that, to support that, to help offer suggestions for enrichment. If we see an area of interest on this avenue, then we could make suggestions for that. It's not for everybody. I'll just say it's all about releasing control, and it's terrifying for a lot of parents because it is really going off the path, and it's not for everybody.
It sounds very exciting though.
I know. I wish I had that option when I was in high school.
Right. Because I would have just curled up with a book and lay on my bed, and I would have been away because that was all I ever wanted to do, was read and leave me alone. So I would have been so happy. But then, yeah, who knows? Okay. So, quick question. What was the engineering organization you found online during the pandemic, Debbie? Could you just repeat their name?
It was called Blue Stamp Engineering. And I believe they're still doing virtual programs. They actually they send students a kit. They can choose a project. They send a kit to the child's home, like a real kit, and then they meet virtually and work on their projects. And then they all had to present them at the end of it was like 10 weeks or something. There's another program people might be interested in called AI in Spirit. I'll put it in the chat. And that is a newer program that's for students who are interested in programming and AI. And it's also virtual from all over the world.
Oh, that's phenomenal. Oh, that sounds very exciting. Now I wish I was young enough to do it.
I know. Not fair.
I know, right? So we have resisted getting our 15-year-old diagnosed, want to avoid all that may come with labeling. Any pros or cons from your perspective?
Yeah, this is a great question and something that comes up a lot. I would say ultimately it's your decision. And I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer. What I have learned from adults who discovered their neurodivergence as an adult, or maybe found out when they were older that they had ADHD and it wasn't supported, or, when they were younger, or wasn't identified. And so they kind of made that to mean that there was something wrong with them. Like the way that they internalized their experience was negative for them and their self-worth. And so what I've heard from many adults and young people who have gotten a formal diagnosis of something is that for many, or for most people, it has been a recognition that comes with relief, and knowing that this isn't a flaw about who they are. It's not that they're just not trying hard enough, or there's something wrong with them, but rather it is the way that they are wired. And in fact, they're exactly like the way that they show up, or the things they struggle with makes 100% sense because their brain is wired in such a way. So I think what I hear is that a lot of the stigma and the worry about labels, that often comes from our own ideas that we have around certain labels and stigmas. And so I really encourage parents, something I talk a lot about in Tilt, is to really kind of do their own inner work to explore what ideas they might have around certain labels, what they make certain labels mean, or what that means for their child's potential in the future if they have this label associated with them, so that we're not kind of mucking up any of the energy attached with any kind of diagnosis our kids might get. So yeah, I don't know. I'm just going to throw this out there too. My friend Julie Lythcott-Hames, she wrote this amazing book, which you may have read, How to Raise an Adult. And she has a new book out called Your Turn, How to Be an Adult. But she and her son, Sawyer, who I think is 20 or 21 now, they just recorded a really cool podcast with the Children's Health Commission, CHC. It's a San Francisco Bay organization. And Sawyer was diagnosed with ADHD when he was in middle school, but they didn't really, Julie and her partner didn't really acknowledge it. Like they didn't want to put that label on him. And they talk about that very thing. The whole episode is about, what does that feel like? What did that feel like for him now that he's an adult, to grow up with that not being really recognized or supported, and how that's played out. So I encourage you to listen to that if it's something you're thinking about. I learned a lot from that conversation.
Oh, I love that. That is now on my list.
Sorry,
awesome. Thank you.
Lots of resources.
Oh, no, please don't be sorry. We need them all. That is absolutely phenomenal. Thank you. So another question, how do I convince my 17-year-old high school junior to accept screen time limits?
I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh. I don't think we can convince our 17-year-olds to accept anything. So, and I don't mean to say that in a cheeky way, but just honestly, like we can't make them care about things or see things our way. So I just need to put that out there, because this can be an area of a lot of tension in a lot of families. I just got off another call where we were talking about this very thing. And so I always prioritize the relationship, especially with a young adult, which your child is, and maintaining that connection is more important to me than anything else. So I use that as a foundation for every conversation, every guideline, every thing I'm concerned about, everything we need to negotiate or figure out together. I come back to the relationship. I'm going to throw out the book, The Self-Driven Child by Ned Johnson and William Stixrud. That has been my kind of go-to for navigating this kind of stuff. And actually they have a new book out called What Do You Say, which is amazing. And it literally tells you what to say, like how to have this conversation in a way that is going to be respectful, that's going to ultimately let your child know that you care too much about your relationship with them to get into a battle over this, give you a chance to air your concerns and your reasons for wanting to have these limitations, and then figuring it out together. Like, this isn't working, so how can we navigate this together so that it feels good for both of us? But I would really prioritize the relationship rather than kind of top down limits. And especially I'll just say this, because they're 17, like I'll just say I've given up on the limits. Like, we have guidelines, but ultimately, like, my child is not going to be living at home in another year or two. And I'm not going to be there to be like, oh, time to get off your phone, time to do this. And so my goal is for my child to really understand their own limits and how to have a relationship with technology and screens that is healthy and balanced. And it might take a while. It might not happen as soon as they leave the house, but that's what I'm working towards. So everything I do in terms of conversations and guidelines and discussions is always with that bigger goal in mind.
Awesome. Thank you, Kiki. I'm going to try and squeeze in two questions.
Sorry, I'm talking too long. Yeah.
You're not. Everything you say is absolutely phenomenal. I'm like hanging on your every word and taking notes. So I'm going to squeeze in two more if you don't mind. Question number one, how do you tell your ASD tween that they are on the spectrum or have ASD without making it a negative thing? I don't want them to use it as an excuse not to try stuff or to feel that they're so different from their peers.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any one way to do it. We did it over yogurt, frozen yogurt. So like you could do, kind of make it kind of a lighthearted thing. But there are certainly books out there. Jennifer Cook, who wrote the Ask for Kids book of social rules, I think it's called, is really good. Like you might do it with some books and say, hey, and I'm assuming that you've gone through some sort of formal evaluation if you have this diagnosis. And so, we've been really doing this exploration to understand how your brain works and what's going on. And we've got some information that we wanted you to know about. And it's great because it's like putting all these like pieces together, and it's going to help us and help you kind of better figure out how to be in the world in a way that's going to feel better, I think. So I would kind of start it that way. Like this is information. We all benefit when we know more about how we work in the world. I'd have some resources available, some books, but not like say, here, read this. Say like, if you want to explore it more, I have some really great books and I'm happy to read this with you. But you might be surprised. I don't know your child, but again, a lot of kids, when they find out, they're either like, oh, okay, yeah, whatever, I figured, or, or they're relieved. Like finally they have like an identity where they don't feel like they're the misfit. In fact, they fully belong in that community. So I just kind of would approach it with curiosity and check yourself before it, like check in with any fear or anxiety you have about it. Try to calm that part before you sit down with your child.
I love that. Yes. A comment quickly. Me and my husband, ADHD diagnosis was such a relief. It explained everything and got us treatment we needed for decades. And then our final question is, if a teen goes undiagnosed and wants to attend college, would they be at a disadvantage or excluded from accommodations or services in college?
Well, that's a good question. Every school is different, but my understanding is that if your child is going to need certain accommodations, whether that's, more time on tests or be able to use technology in different ways, those types of supports, having a diagnosis is going to be important because a lot of schools are going to want to, they're going to want that. They're going to want to have kind of proof that this is something that is required for them to be successful. So I would say yes. And a lot of people choose to do some sort of an assessment when their child is like a sophomore or junior in high school. So they have pretty fresh results and a fresh evaluation to share with college administrators.
I'm going to be really bad and break my regular rule only because Catherine's quote was stuck in the chat rather than in the question, in the Q&A. She said, how important is it to keep a 2E kid constantly learning outside of school? My son attends remotely a school for 2E kids, and a lot of the parents are always talking about camps, classes, and that's not really for them.
I think it's only important if it's important to your child. Like there's no need to keep up with the Joneses. And I think it's really hard. When you are in communities of 2E kids, and I get triggered. I see like, oh my gosh, we haven't done a chess competition. Should we be? You start getting caught up like all these things. And do we need to do this? Follow your child's lead. If they are engaged in their life and they're doing things that they enjoy and they're pursuing different avenues, just go with that. There's no musts here. We all get to make up our own rules for what this looks like for our families.
That was absolutely perfect. And I actually think that may also have answered Susan's question, because she was asking about the influence of social media on this population, because her child will not do any social media. And so if your child doesn't want to do it, they don't have to, right?
I think it's mine isn't on any by choice. So I think kids who choose not to have a lot of self-preservation instincts. And there's certainly a lot of research on how challenging, especially things like Instagram are on teen girls and what it's doing to these kids. So I don't think if a child is choosing not to be on social media that we should be concerned about that. I'm not sure if that's what your question was, but that's.
Yeah, they were concerned because there is that huge influence and their child won't do it. So should their child be on there? And I'm with you. If we can wean some more kids off it, I think I'd be happier. It's crazy. So Debbie, I don't know how to thank you. It's been an absolute delight. I personally have learned so much. I know that everybody watching with us today and those people that will tune in and watch the recordings will glean so much from you. Just wanted to let everybody know that you can reach Debbie and please, I know that she'd be really happy and delighted to help you. So please reach out to her at tiltparenting.com. Did I get that right?
You got it. Yes.
All right. So it's been an absolute pleasure. If today's conversation has made a difference for you and you'd like to share how, please email me. Our email is crucialconversations@2ecenter.org. I would love to hear how hearing from Debbie has impacted you and your family. So you'll shortly see a pop-up survey. Please take a few seconds to answer it. We really are wanting to know who you'd like us to talk to next, what topics you'd like us to be discussing, because we want to keep our crucial conversations relevant to those people who are tuning in. So we will resume crucial conversations in March. I can't believe it. So we'll be on March 16th and I'll have two guests. Oh, two. We're branching out, so I'm going to have two guests. Next month, we'll be talking, I'm quite sure, as parents, we've all had children who have problems with their eating. Some of our children won't eat. Some of our children are very picky eaters, and some of our children want to eat junk food. I'm a walking example of what junk food does to you. Well, I have an ed therapist and a naturalist, a natural herbalist, who are going to be talking to us about creating food that our children can eat. And some of it is so healthy and the kids don't even know. And so I am truly excited and looking forward to that. Once again, Debbie, I cannot thank you enough. You're such a wealth of knowledge. You are so amazing. And we are really, really grateful that you took the time to spend with us and enlighten us. So everybody have a great rest of your day. Enjoy the month and make sure that on the 16th, that you come back and join us. We're going to